Throughout history, humanity has asked itself the biggest questions. Where did we come from? Who are we? And where are we going? But there's another question, bolder, unsettling, and often left unspoken. Are we truly the first civilization on this planet? Most people dismiss it as fantasy, the stuff of science fiction or wild conspiracy theories. After all, we're taught to believe that human history is a straight line, from stone tools to modern industry, from caves to skyscrapers. Everything fits neatly into a tidy timeline, sealed inside textbooks as if no other possibility exists. Yet when we step back and look at the far bigger picture, the one painted by nature and geology, that certainty begins to look like nothing more than a thin coat of paint covering the abyss of the unknown. Think about it. Earth has been around for more than 4.5 billion years. In that time, mountains have risen and crumbled, oceans have opened and closed, and millions of species have appeared and vanished. Human history, the part with writing, cities, and monuments, barely stretches back 5,000 years. On the scale of geologic time, that's a single blink. If Earth's history were compressed into one single day, everything we call civilization would appear in only the last few seconds before midnight. In that light, our existence is no more than a flicker, a fragile spark that could easily be swept away and forgotten. And so the haunting question arises, in all those billions of years, could it really be that civilization happened only once? Is it possible that long before us, millions of years before us, there was another civilization, one that flourished, then vanished, leaving the planet empty once more, so that we could believe we were the first? If answers exist, they won't be found in dusty chronicles, but buried deep in the earth itself. Yet the earth is a merciless keeper. Rock bends and folds, rivers carve and erode, continents drift. Every structure, no matter how grand, eventually gets crushed, buried, or recycled into something new. If a city of glass and steel had stood here 10 million years ago, today not a trace would remain. It would be erased as though it never existed. That's the paradox. The same vastness of time that allows civilizations to rise also ensures that their evidence can vanish without a whisper. We live in an age that worships data and evidence, but evidence survives only if it is lucky enough to withstand geology's relentless destruction, which means absence of evidence is not the same thing as evidence of absence. Tonight, let us open our minds to a possibility that has long been cast aside, that history may not have begun where we think it did, that behind the curtain of what we call known may lie an entire world lost to memory. And even if no other civilization came before us, the question still matters. It reminds us that Earth has never been designed for humans alone. Our civilization is just one fragile experiment in an endless chain of experiments this planet has run across the ages. It forces us to see ourselves differently, not as absolute masters, but as temporary tenants in an indifferent universe, on a world that has reinvented itself countless times. And maybe, just maybe, that sense of humility is what could save us before Earth, once again, wipes the slate clean and begins all over again. There's a concept in science called deep time. It's an abyss of time so vast that the human mind can barely grasp it. We're used to short scales, a day, a year, a lifetime. Even dynasties and empires lasting centuries feel long to us. But against the backdrop of the universe, all those numbers are nothing more than dust in the wind. Earth formed over 4.5 billion years ago. In that span, life has flourished and vanished countless times. Just within the Phanerozoic eon, the last 540 million years, there have been at least 5 mass extinctions, each wiping out the majority of life that once ruled the planet. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, have been here for less than 300,000 years. And the part of our story we can actually read, the era of writing and recorded history, takes up less than 0.01% of the planet's lifespan. If Earth's history were written as a 1,000-page book, humanity would appear only in the final lines. To feel just how small that really is, picture a giant clock. At midnight, Earth is born out of cosmic dust. By 4 a.m., the first cells emerge. By 8 p.m., multicellular life spreads. And not until 11:58 and 43 seconds does modern humanity arrive. All of recorded history, from Egypt and Sumer to Greece and today's skyscrapers, fits within just a few seconds before the clock strikes midnight. Placed in that perspective, we're forced to face a chilling thought. If an industrial civilization had existed before us, it could have lived and died millions or even tens of millions of years ago. What are the chances we'd ever find a trace of it? Geology doesn't keep everything. Layers of Earth are torn apart by tectonic shifts, ground to dust by glaciers or swallowed by oceans. A massive city that stood 5 million years ago might now be nothing more than sandstone or buried miles beneath the surface where no human hand will ever reach. And if such a civilization had only flickered briefly, lasting thousands or even tens of thousands of years, then, in the ocean of deep time, it would register as no more than a heartbeat before vanishing. We like to think that greatness endures, but geology teaches us a harsher truth. Time doesn't care about greatness or scale. It crushes metal, erases inscriptions, melts mountains themselves. It reduces everything to anonymous sediment until the original picture is gone forever. Even fossils, the greatest records of ancient life, represent only the tiniest fraction of all the creatures that once lived. So how can we be so sure that we were the only ones to ever reach this level of industry? If the past is an ocean, then what we know is no more than seashells collected on the shore. Our entire story of history rests on scattered fragments, while the vast deep still lies hidden in darkness. Here, deep time is not just a scientific idea. It's a lesson in humility. It reminds us that our existence is not the pinnacle, but just a thin slice in an endless current. And in that thin slice, it's entirely possible we were not the first to ignite the flame of civilization. Human history survives through memory and writing. But memory is fragile, and writing lasts only as long as someone is there to protect it. We often forget that every civilization stands on an extremely delicate foundation, collective memory. And memory, if it isn't constantly nourished, fades faster than we like to imagine. Look at the civilizations that once burned bright, only to vanish. The Maya, with their pyramids and intricate glyphs, fell into darkness within just a few centuries after their collapse. The Hittites, once rivals of Egypt, once rulers of Anatolia, disappeared so completely from human memory that for over 2,000 years the world forgot they had ever existed, until archaeology brought their ruins back into the light. Even Roman concrete, a technology far ahead of its time, was lost for centuries before being rediscovered. This shows us something sobering. Without a written thread to carry it forward, a civilization can be nearly forgotten in just a few generations. Children grow up never hearing the old stories. Manuscripts rot away in archives before they can be copied. Temples collapse, forests reclaim stone. And before long, what was once common knowledge lingers only as a vague legend, or worse, vanishes entirely. We've already seen this kind of forgetting happen within just a few thousand years. So what would remain if millions of years passed? A language, the most delicate product of the mind, disappears the moment no one speaks it. A library, the concentrated soul of knowledge, can vanish overnight in a fire. And a civilization, no matter how grand, will be erased if there's no unbroken chain of tradition to carry it forward. The painful question then is this: could there have been memories like these, entire traditions severed and lost, long before our civilization stepped onto the stage? If so, all that remains of them would be faint ripples in myth, and indeed such ripples echo across the world, tales of a lost golden age, of a great flood, of giants or gods who once walked the earth. These repeating motifs appear in Greece and India, in the Americas and Polynesia, as though they were fragments of some shattered memory, broken but not entirely gone. Perhaps they are the last driftwood pieces of an ancient past, carried into our collective imagination. When we understand this, we see that human history is less like a fortress carved in stone, and more like a picture drawn in sand, waiting for the first wind to blur it away. One great wave, war, plague, disaster, and an entire memory could vanish in an instant. And when time's dust settles, those who come after might walk across a clean shore, believing no trace had ever been there at all. In the end, history isn't a permanent treasure chest, it's a fragile song, and if we stop singing it, the melody is lost forever. If another civilization once walked this planet before us, the first question we'd ask is, why is there no trace of it? To answer that, we have to stop seeing Earth as a static stage and instead recognize it for what it really is, a colossal machine, endlessly grinding, recycling, and reshaping everything on its surface. Earth is alive. Not just because it harbors life, but because the planet itself never stops moving. Mountains rise and then wear down. Oceans open and close. Continents drift on tectonic plates, colliding to form the Himalayas, breaking apart to open the Atlantic. What we call land today is only a snapshot in a never-ending geological dance. Now picture a modern city: steel, glass, concrete, electricity. If abandoned, within just a few centuries nature would reclaim it. Trees would split through pavement, storms would collapse towers. In a few thousand years the ruins would crumble. In a few 100,000 only faint traces might linger in the sediment. And after millions of years, tectonic cycles would bury that layer deep, grind it into stone, or melt it into magma. On the scale of geology, a few million years is nothing more than a blink, which means even an industrial civilization lasting 10,000 years, twice as long as our entire written history, would vanish completely within a million or two. Metals would rust and dissolve, plastics would decompose or be buried beyond recognition, skyscrapers would collapse, weather away, and disappear like pebbles on a riverbank. This is why the geological record holds so little that looks like civilization. The layers we can actually study reach back only tens of millions of years, and most of those have already been reshaped by tectonics. Anything deeper lies out of reach or has been transformed so thoroughly that no original form survives. Archaeology has gifted us with stunning fossils of dinosaurs, impressions of ancient trees, and stone layers that record climates millions of years old. But all of these survived only because of incredibly rare conditions: rapid burial, oxygen-poor environments, protection from disturbance. A civilization spread across the globe could never expect to be preserved wholesale under such lucky circumstances. Earth, with its relentless movements, is like a master artist, brilliant but merciless. To paint a new picture on its surface, it erases the old one. In this light, the disappearance of civilizations, if any came before us, is not mysterious at all. It's inevitable, so when we fail to find evidence, it doesn't mean that evidence never existed. It means Earth has done its job well, hiding the past beneath rock layers, ocean floors, and continents long since set adrift. And here we face a chilling truth. If humanity itself were to vanish, our present civilization, with all its power and technology, would share the same fate. In 10 million years, nothing would remain but a few odd anomalies in the strata. One day, if some new species rises and asks the same question we're asking now, they may tell themselves, there are no traces, so they must have never existed. Let's run a thought experiment. Imagine that tomorrow humanity vanishes from Earth. No more people to maintain buildings, repair roads, or keep machines running. Everything we call civilization would begin to unravel. But how fast would it all collapse? And after 100 million years, would anything remain to prove we were ever here? Within days, most power plants would shut down. Cities would go dark. Within months, wildlife would reclaim abandoned streets. Within years, rooftops would collapse, highways would crack. In just a few decades, the skyscrapers that once symbolized human pride and power would be nothing more than rusting skeletons. Forests would surge back, swallowing concrete whole. Within centuries, wooden structures would rot away completely. Metals, from iron to aluminum, would corrode and crumble. Only the more durable materials like glass, ceramics, or certain synthetic compounds might last longer. But even they would not escape the slow grind of time. After a few thousand years, nearly every city would be buried beneath soil and vegetation. Monumental structures, dams, bridges, statues, if they survived at all, would stand as scattered ruins, hard to distinguish from natural rock. Seas would rise, glaciers would melt, storms would erode. The mark of modern urban life would reduce to rubble. After hundreds of thousands of years, almost all traces of metal would be gone. Concrete, once thought to be permanent, would break down into grains, blending into sediment. Humanity's great works, from New York to Shanghai, from the pyramids to the Great Wall, would be reduced to indistinguishable layers in the earth. After millions of years, the surface of the planet would have transformed. New mountains would rise, old ones would wear away, rivers would carve new paths, deserts would spread, tectonic plates would shift continents thousands of miles, burying what remains deep underground or thrusting it up as new mountain ranges. If some intelligent species dug into the earth then, they would need to dig miles down just to find faint traces, and even if they uncovered them, would they recognize them as signs of intelligence, or simply dismiss them as odd natural formations? And then, after 100 million years, Earth would be unrecognizable. Oceans might have opened or closed, continents rearranged. What was once the heart of global civilization could now lie beneath a deep sea. All of humanity's buildings, machines, and achievements would be reduced to thin anomalies in the geologic record, a sudden spike in carbon, a fossilized layer of plastic, a few strange radioactive isotopes. That's all. No Eiffel Tower, no Statue of Liberty, no internet, no books. Nothing tough that faint scars beneath the surface. This thought experiment drives home a brutal truth. Even our global civilization has no chance of lasting in the abyss of deep time. We will be wiped from Earth's surface, just as millions of species before us were erased. And if some other intelligence rises later, they will face the same question we are asking now. Was there ever a civilization before us? That question will echo forever, because Earth doesn't write history in words. It writes in stone, in fossils, in faint traces almost too subtle for the eye to catch. Everything else is just an illusion of permanence we project onto ourselves. When humans dig into the earth in search of the past, we often imagine we're flipping through a giant book, with each rock layer a page in history. But in truth, that book is riddled with holes, missing chapters, and overwritten passages. The geological record is not a perfect archive, it's a broken one, full of gaps, an archaeological black hole where most of Earth's history has vanished forever. Consider the fossil record. Across billions of years, only the tiniest fraction of life has ever been fossilized. Most organisms, once dead, simply decay, are eaten, or decompose without leaving a trace. To become a fossil requires extraordinary luck, rapid burial, low oxygen, stable conditions for millions of years. Out of the countless species that once lived, we know only a sliver. If life itself is so fragile in the record, then civilizations, built from materials far more perishable, stand even less chance of being preserved. The strata are like a canvas scraped clean over and over, with only a few streaks of paint left behind. Ancient layers are recycled by tectonic forces, melted into magma, or buried deep beneath the sea. The deeper we dig, the more silence we encounter. Whole spans of tens of millions of years are geological blank pages, as if someone tore chapters straight from the book. This creates a troubling paradox. We believe we understand the distant past, yet in reality we are reconstructing a story from fragments, like trying to rewrite a 1,000-page novel from a handful of surviving sentences. Anything that didn't fossilize, anything that wasn't preserved by sheer chance, has been erased completely from Earth's memory. Think about layers older than 100 million years. In many places they are warped, fragmented, or buried so deep we may never reach them. Which means if an industrial civilization once existed in that window, the odds of us finding its traces are vanishingly small. Entire cities, roads, machines, all could have been crushed, melted, or remade into anonymous stone. That's why the silence of the archaeological record doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove no civilization ever came before us. It only proves that Earth is very good at hiding its past. In the immensity of deep time, that silence echoes like a warning. Every civilization, including ours, can vanish without a trace. When we stare into this archaeological black hole, we aren't just asking whether someone came before us. We're also forced to confront our own future. If humanity disappears one day, will the next pages of Earth's book record anything of us at all? Or will we too become nothing more than another blank space in the endless dark? As we search for traces of the past, sometimes we stumble upon things that simply don't fit, artifacts that seem out of place in the layers where they're found. Researchers call them parts, out-of-place artifacts. They are the stray notes in archaeology's grand symphony, the oddities that make us wonder, is history more complicated than we've been taught? Some parts can be explained away by coincidence or misinterpretation, but others linger in the grey zones of science. Take the Klerksdorp spheres from South Africa, small metallic balls, some with parallel grooves etched into their surface, discovered in rock layers said to be billions of years old. Mainstream science attributes them to natural geological processes, yet to many they look eerily like crafted objects. Then there's the Baghdad battery, a small ceramic jar with a copper core, possibly used as a primitive electrical cell more than 2,000 years ago, long before electricity was supposedly discovered. Or the Piri Reis map, drawn in the 16th century, which astonishingly depicts the coast of Antarctica in detail, centuries before the continent was officially explored. Individually, such artifacts might be nothing more than curiosities. But when viewed together, they begin to suggest a haunting possibility, that human history is not a straight line, but a spiral, where knowledge is found, lost, and rediscovered. Each time a civilization falls, most of its legacy vanishes, leaving only scattered fragments, puzzling and controversial. Of course, scientists remain cautious. Most parts are explained in more grounded ways: geological quirks, errors in dating, or the embellishments of human imagination. Yet even when explained, their value remains. They remind us of how little we truly know. History is not a finished painting. It's a patchwork quilt, riddled with holes, sometimes covered only by guesses. These strange objects fuel myths of lost civilizations. They may not serve as direct proof, but they are sparks, sparks that ignite imagination. And sometimes imagination is what drives us to ask the daring questions. So what if one day, beneath ancient stone, we uncover a rusted screw tens of millions of years old, or a shard of fossilized plastic from the age of dinosaurs? Would we have the courage to accept that we were not the first civilization? Or would we invent another explanation simply to avoid facing that truth? In the end, OOPArts are not just artifacts, they are mirrors reflecting the limits of our knowledge. And in their very strangeness, they may be the strongest evidence of all that the world is far larger and far stranger than we can imagine. When we imagine an industrial civilization, we picture machines of steel, concrete towers reinforced with iron, and networks of copper wires carrying electricity. If a society like that ever existed before us, surely it would have known and mastered metals. And yet the paradox is this: metals, the very symbol of technology, are among the most fragile things in their dialogue with time. Iron, the material of knives, swords, railroads, and skyscrapers, is also the metal most vulnerable to rust. In damp conditions, just a few decades can reduce massive blocks of iron to reddish dust. Abandoned railroad tracks in a forest can crumble in less than a lifetime, swallowed by vines. After only a few thousand years, every iron structure would be gone, leaving nothing but faint traces of oxide mixed into the soil and rock. Copper, the metal of wires, statues, and tools, lasts longer than iron, but is far from eternal. Over time it corrodes, forming a green patina. After tens of thousands of years, it too breaks down, merging with the surrounding minerals and losing its original shape. Only in the driest, most sealed, oxygen-poor conditions do copper artifacts stand a chance of lasting much longer, and those are rare exceptions, not the rule for an entire civilization's legacy. Gold and silver, precious metals, are far more durable. But even if they remain, would a few scattered fragments of gold really prove the existence of an industry? After all, we already find natural gold nuggets underground without assuming they were shaped by intelligence. A lost civilization leaving behind only a sprinkling of gold would hardly be enough to count as evidence. Even concrete, one of modernity's proudest achievements, will not last forever. It cracks under ice and heat, breaks apart under the pressure of roots. After tens of thousands of years, a concrete city would be nothing more than rubble. After millions, all of it would be absorbed into sediment, becoming part of the geology, indistinguishable from natural stone. This leads to an unsettling truth. If an industrial civilization had existed millions of years ago, the metallic traces of its presence might already be gone. The best we could hope to find would be chemical anomalies, a sudden layer of radioactive isotopes, an unusual spike in carbon, or microscopic metal particles scattered through strata. But even if we uncovered such anomalies, would we dare to say, this is the fingerprint of a lost civilization? Or would we retreat to safer ground, attributing everything to natural processes, because that feels more comfortable to our view of history? Seen in this light, we understand why even the ancient civilizations we do know, Sumer, Egypt, Rome, left behind so little. What we possess today is not the norm, it is the exception, the rare fragments lucky enough to survive. We're looking at a thin sliver of the past and mistaking it for the whole picture. And if we ourselves were to vanish, our steel skyscrapers, concrete highways, and copper grids would share the same fate. Give it a few million years and they too would disappear, erased as though they had never been. When material ruins vanish into the dust of geology, what sometimes remains is not stone or metal, but memory. And memory often survives not in official histories, but in myths. Across the world, from Greece to India, from the Pacific to the Americas, we encounter strange tales of great civilizations that disappeared. Atlantis is the most famous. Told by Plato in the dialogues Timaeus and Critias, It was a mighty island, advanced and powerful, that sank beneath the sea in a single catastrophic day and night. For many, Atlantis is nothing more than allegory, a political metaphor, a parable about arrogance. Yet across thousands of years it has lived on as a collective memory, a whisper that perhaps a world before ours once existed. It leaves us haunted with the question, could entire civilizations vanish, leaving behind nothing but legend? Farther east we find Lemuria, an imagined continent in the Indian Ocean. Originally proposed in the 19th century by scientists to explain the distribution of certain animal species, Lemuria later slipped into esoteric lore, retold as a radiant land swallowed by the sea. Similarly, Mu, a name tied to Pacific myths, was said to be a vast lost continent where a great civilization once thrived before its downfall. What is striking is that across cultures separated by thousands of miles, the same story emerges, a golden age, destroyed by oceans or disaster, leaving modern humanity as the survivors. Is this merely coincidence, a pattern of the imagination? Or is it the faint echo of real catastrophes passed down across millennia as blurred ancestral memory? Mainstream science treats Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu as myth or speculation. But in the perspective of deep time, their meaning shifts. These stories remind us of a feeling that never quite leaves us, the sense that we are not the first, that there were others before us, remembered only in whispers. Perhaps these legends are not about industrial civilizations in the modern sense. Perhaps they reflect something more primal, humanity's deepest fear that everything we build will one day be swallowed whole, surviving only as hazy recollections for those who come after. And when those memories travel through thousands of years, they transform into myth, fragments of something too immense to be fully grasped. Atlantis and Mu may never be proven. Yet their power lies in forcing us to pause, to look backward with suspicion, and to ask the forbidden question. Because perhaps these myths are not just stories. Perhaps they are quiet warnings, left by those who lived long before history officially began. There is one story humanity seems to share everywhere. The story of a great flood, waters rising to swallow the world, sweeping away cities and people, leaving only a handful of survivors. What's strange is how universal this tale is. It isn't just the Bible's account of Noah's Ark. It appears in Sumerian legends in India, in China, and even among indigenous peoples of the Americas and the Pacific. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, written thousands of years before the Bible, a man named Utnapishtim is warned by the gods of a devastating flood. He builds a great boat, carries his family and animals aboard, and releases a bird after the waters recede. Details almost identical to the Noah story. In India, the legend tells of the god Vishnu appearing as a fish to warn Manu of an oncoming flood, prompting him to build a vessel to survive. In Greece, the myth of Deucalion and Pyrrha describes a deluge that wipes out nearly all humankind, leaving only 2 people to repopulate the earth. Even far-off tribes in the Americas share similar accounts. The Maya spoke of earlier worlds destroyed by floods. The Hopi told of human ages, each ending in catastrophe, one of them a flood. Polynesian peoples living on scattered islands in the vast Pacific passed down stories of tsunamis swallowing entire lands. The question is, why does the same motif appear everywhere across cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, with no direct connection? Perhaps it's simply a universal image. Water gives life, but it also destroys, so maybe it was natural for ancient people to imagine a flood sweeping everything away. But perhaps, just perhaps, these stories are not inventions but echoes, a collective memory of something real, Science has revealed evidence that at the end of the Ice Age, around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose abruptly as the glaciers melted. Low-lying coastal regions, home to countless human communities, were swallowed by the ocean. Marine geology shows the rapid disappearance of vast land masses like Doggerland, once a bridge connecting Britain to continental Europe, now lying beneath the North Sea. If we had been there to witness it, the memory would surely have been seared into us, passed down through generations until it became myth, a tale of a flood that destroyed the whole world. But there's an even bolder possibility that the flood myths don't just reflect the chaos of the post-Ice Age seas, but faintly preserve the memory of lost prehistoric civilizations washed away. If there were once coastal societies with towns, harbors, or even primitive industries, then rising seas could have erased them all, leaving nothing behind but stories whispered across time. Whether imagination or memory, the Great Flood carries a deeper truth, that every civilization, no matter how grand, can be swept away in a moment. And when that happens, what remains is not stone or steel, but a story, echoing faintly in the darkness of time. Earth, for all its grandeur, has never been a perfectly safe home. This planet doesn't just nurture life, it has repeatedly destroyed it. The geological record is filled with resets, global catastrophes that wiped away most living things, clearing the stage for entirely new eras. And if any civilization existed before us, it is these cycles of destruction that may have delivered their final sentence. Asteroids are the classic threat. 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid slammed into Chicxulub in what is now Mexico, triggering the extinction that ended the age of the dinosaurs. In a geological instant, 75% of Earth's species vanished. If an industrial civilization had existed back then, it would have been annihilated, its cities reduced to ash, its works consumed by fire and tsunamis. After a few million years, all that would remain is a strange layer in the rocks, a chemical scar marking the day the sky fell. Supervolcanoes are quieter, but no less deadly. About 74,000 years ago, the eruption of Toba in Sumatra nearly erased early modern humans, leaving behind a genetic bottleneck where Homo sapiens may have dwindled to only a few thousand survivors. The towering columns of ash from a supereruption can block sunlight for years, collapsing agriculture, sparking global famine. Even the most advanced civilization would stand powerless before such an event. Ice ages are slower, but just as merciless. Over the last 2 million years, Earth has cycled through periods when glaciers spread across continents, only to melt back again, raising sea levels by tens of meters. Any coastal cities that existed during those times would have been buried, drowned, erased, again and again. Even today we live in what scientists call the late Ice Age, in a temporary warm intermission between colder phases. Our current sea level is just a fleeting pause in Earth's vast climate rhythm. Add to this the other global shifts, changes in Earth's orbit, fluctuations in solar activity, the rerouting of ocean currents. These forces have turned deserts into grasslands, grasslands into deserts, and reshaped the habitats of ancient humanity. An industrial civilization, unable to adapt, would have been just as vulnerable, ground down by the planet's shifting breath. These cycles of destruction reveal a chilling truth. Earth is not a stable home, but a battlefield of immense natural forces. Civilizations exist only because they happen to live in the quiet intervals between disasters. When the next great wave comes, whether asteroid, supervolcano, or advancing ice, everything we've built could vanish as if it had never been. And in the vast scale of deep time, these resets are the heartbeat of the planet. Each beat wipes away a chapter, leaving a blank page for the next. Perhaps there were chapters long ago that we will never read, civilizations erased by the pulse of Earth itself. If most cities, metals, monuments, and even collective memory dissolve with time, the next question is this: is there anything strong enough from a civilization to outlast geology's relentless erasure? Could there be a kind of signature still etched in the Earth tens or even hundreds of millions of years later, silently testifying that an industrial society once existed here? The answer may lie not in architecture or artifacts, but in geology and chemistry. Rocks, rivers, and mountains are recycled, but global chemical shifts can linger in the strata. Just as we know about the Chicxulub asteroid impact 66 million years ago, not because we found the asteroid itself, but because of a thin layer rich in iridium, an unmistakable chemical fingerprint. Modern civilization, too, is leaving its own signals. Greenhouse gases are the most obvious. The CO2 and CH4 we release into the atmosphere are partly absorbed by the oceans and will eventually settle into sediments. Millions of years from now, a geologist could drill into the rock and find an anomaly, a sudden spike in carbon concentration marking our age. There are also radioactive signatures. Nuclear weapons tests of the 20th century left behind rare isotopes like plutonium-244 and cesium-137, elements that don't naturally occur in significant quantities. Though many will decay over time, some artificial isotopes or their byproducts could still leave indirect evidence, clues for a far future scientist to uncover. Plastic is another candidate. While much of it breaks down quickly in the open environment, some of it gets buried, compressed, and transformed into a strange new rock, plastiglomerate. If it endures, these unusual layers would stand as clear markers of a time when artificial materials blanketed the globe. Then there are the traces of rare metals. Our mining and smelting are scattering elements like lead, mercury, and rare earths across the planet. In the geological record, this may appear as a distinct sedimentary layer, different enough from what came before and after to draw attention. All of these potential markers, if they persist, would form what geologists of the future might call the Anthropocene layer, the stratum of humanity. Thin, fragile, but global. And if we imagine a civilization before ours, perhaps they too left behind such scars, chemical fingerprints we have yet to recognize or properly decode. Here lies the paradox. What endures is not the grand monuments, but the unintended byproducts, pollution, waste, emissions. Temples crumble, but carbon in rock remains. Statues fall, but radioactive isotopes still whisper. In geology's long view, the most enduring legacy of a civilization may be what it accidentally scattered across the earth. And so we are left with a sobering question. If today we are laying down an anomalous layer for the future, will it be read as the mark of intelligence or as the trace of a catastrophe? If the Earth's crust is a stone ledger recording the planet's upheavals, then the atmosphere is its living diary, a place where every breath, every shift of life and technology leaves a mark. It's no coincidence that today scientists can drill ice cores from Antarctica or Greenland and read climate history stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Trapped in bubbles within the ice, the air of the past still lingers, like letters mailed from a vanished world. This raises an intriguing question. If there was once an industrial civilization before us, might they have left traces in the atmosphere? Fossilized signatures we could still find? Right now, we are writing such a record ourselves. Carbon dioxide levels are higher than at any point in millions of years. Methane has spiked sharply. Artificial compounds like CFCs, chemicals that never existed naturally, have been released into the stratosphere. If another civilization once walked this earth, perhaps they too left similar signs, atmospheric anomalies too unnatural to be explained by volcanoes or climate shifts alone. But how could such fragile signals survive for millions of years? Not in the air itself, but in sediments. Greenhouse gases dissolve into seawater, where they precipitate as carbonates, stored in limestone and ocean mud. Industrial dust settles, gets buried, and becomes a chemical signature within the strata. Just as we recognize the Chicxulub asteroid impact not by the asteroid, but by a thin iridium-rich layer, so too could future scientists discover our carbon layer. More telling still, some isotopes we create endure for staggering spans of time. Carbon-14 decays over 5,700 years. Uranium-235 can persist for hundreds of millions. If any prior civilization had harnessed nuclear power or produced industrial emissions at scale, in theory, unusual isotope ratios might still be detectable, even tens of millions of years later. This leaves us with a chilling vision. The atmosphere does not forget. Even if we vanish completely, what we exhale into it today will remain etched into stone, a message for future eyes to decipher. And conversely, if someone came before us, their faint atmospheric fingerprints may still be lying dormant in the rocks, waiting for us to recognize them. The tragedy is this: when a civilization disappears, what lasts is not its poetry, its art, or its philosophy, but its pollution. Its final signature in the atmospheric record may be nothing more than a cold chemical anomaly. And if we do not change course, that too may be our legacy, a suicide note written in toxic air, sealed in stone, waiting to be opened by beings who will never even know the word human. If rock and ice are the books that record the upheavals of the planet, then DNA is the diary of life itself. Within every cell, the double helix stores not only the instructions to build a body, but also faint shadows of the crises our ancestors endured. Sometimes the history written in genes is older and more haunting than any chronicle humans have ever inscribed. In our genome lie scars, switches turned on or off, variations that could only have emerged when humanity passed through periods of great trial. Geneticists have found evidence of a bottleneck some 70 to 80,000 years ago, when the population of Homo sapiens may have fallen to only a few thousand individuals. The likely cause was the eruption of the Toba supervolcano, which triggered a global climate catastrophe. We have no written records of that event, yet DNA still carries the memory, as if whispering that humanity once came dangerously close to extinction. In other species, the pattern is even clearer. Plants and animals reveal synchronized drops in genetic diversity at the same climatic turning points. It's as though nature itself keeps a diary in genes, recounting waves of extinction, migrations, and collapses. This leads to a provocative thought. If there was ever a civilization before us, could their legacy still echo in DNA, not through their own bodies, but through the disasters they unleashed upon the living world? Imagine an ancient industry releasing toxins that forced selective genetic changes, leaving its mark in the survivors' genomes. Or a nuclear cataclysm whose radiation imprinted distinctive mutations across generations. Of course, this remains speculation. Modern science has only skimmed the surface of the genetic iceberg. Yet the fact that DNA can preserve the tremors of past cataclysms is chilling. It turns the entire biosphere into a living archive, each species a book written in the language of evolution. And as with rock and atmosphere, what lingers in DNA is rarely beauty. It is wounds, extinctions, crises, disasters, all leave scars. In a sense, our very existence today is living proof that our ancestors survived horrors so immense that their memory is still embedded in our blood. If humanity were to vanish, might the DNA of the survivors tell our story too, as a genetic scar? Perhaps one day, millions of years from now, a new intelligence could read strange anomalies in the code of life and wonder, was there once a civilization here, erased in disaster, leaving behind only its shadow in the flesh of the living? We often tell the story of our evolution as if it were a straight line, from primitive apes through slow, steady progress, finally arriving at Homo sapiens, modern humans. But as archaeology and genetics peel back the layers of time, the picture grows far more complex. It turns out we were never the inevitable end of a single path. We are simply the last survivors of a tangled forest of branches, most of which have withered away. As recently as tens of thousands of years ago, Earth was home to many kinds of humans. Homo neanderthalensis lived in Europe and Western Asia. Homo floresiensis, the tiny hobbit, thrived on the island of Flores. Homo naledi left its traces in South Africa. The mysterious Denisovans are known only from fragments of DNA. And there may have been others, unnamed, still hiding in the gaps of the fossil record. For a brief moment on the timescale of evolution, the planet was a stage where multiple human species shared the spotlight. So why are we the only ones left? Was it superior intelligence, flexible cooperation, or just luck in surviving catastrophe? And the deeper, more unsettling question, could there once have been another branch, another species of human, with the intelligence to build an industrial civilization, only to vanish before we arrived? If Homo sapiens could leap from stone tools to spacecraft in less than a few 100,000 years, why is it unthinkable that another cousin in another ice age could have traveled a similar arc? We know so little about the branches that perished. Fossils are scarce, often just a fragment of bone, a tooth, a trace of DNA clinging to ancient soil. Between those empty spaces may lie entire stories we have never heard. Mainstream science rejects the possibility of a lost industrial lineage, since no solid material evidence has surfaced. But as we've seen, geology erases mercilessly and the fossil record is full of holes. The fact that we haven't found something does not prove it never existed. A few million years are all it would take for every city, every tool, even the bones themselves to dissolve and disappear. Which leaves us with a humbling truth. Modern humans are not the destined pinnacle of evolution. We are merely the survivors of countless sieves and brutal tests. The fact that we endure is not proof of absolute superiority. It is proof of chance, of being the ones lucky enough to make it this far. And if intelligent life is not the monopoly of Homo sapiens, then who are we to declare with certainty that no other mind, shaped differently, embodied differently, ever touched the threshold of civilization in ages we can no longer remember? We, with all our pride in technology, may simply be the most recent experiment of nature. And like those before us, we too may vanish, leaving the planet open for the next heir. To move beyond the simple question of was there or wasn't there, let's step into a thought experiment. If an industrial civilization did exist before humanity, then who were they, and how might they have lived? They didn't have to look like us. They may not have been Homo sapiens at all, not even human, as we define it. Perhaps they were a parallel hominin branch, another species that reached dexterity and intelligence. Or maybe they were something else entirely, unrelated to us. A different experiment in complexity. Across 4.5 billion years, Earth has tested countless forms of life, from towering reptiles to tiny mammals. Why should intelligence have bloomed only once? They could have thrived in some ancient era of mild climate, on continents arranged nothing like today's. Their technology might have been radically different, not electricity, but bioenergy, not metals, but organic compounds too fragile to survive deep time. And like us, if they passed through their own industrial age, they may have faced the same dilemmas, overusing resources, poisoning their environment, waging conflicts, enduring nature's disasters. We can imagine their cities rising along ancient coastlines, now long drowned beneath the sea. or vast trade networks stretching across Gondwana back when South America, Africa, Antarctica, and India were still joined as one supercontinent. If they lived tens of millions of years ago, their traces would now be crushed, melted, or buried so deep that no archaeologist could ever reach them. Perhaps they, too, gazed at the sky, wondering about their place in the cosmos. Perhaps they discovered fire, harnessed energy, even touched nuclear physics, and perhaps, like us, they pushed themselves to the edge of destruction with powers they never fully controlled. The chilling part is this: we will never know for certain, but simply asking the question changes how we see ourselves. Because if there truly were those who came before and they vanished, then our own civilization is no triumphant destiny. It is a fragile mirror reflecting the risk of the same fate. Maybe picturing them is less important than the lesson the idea carries. It reminds us that civilization is not a guarantee but a fleeting spark. It can flare and fade, just another of nature's countless experiments. And if there ever was a civilization before us, their total disappearance is the starkest warning we could ever receive. There is no promise that we either will be remembered. Language is the fragile bridge between past and present. It carries memory, experience, knowledge, belief. Yet because it is so fragile, it is also one of the easiest things to lose. Just a few generations of silence are enough for a language to vanish. And when it does, an entire worldview, a system of knowledge, a symbolic universe dies with it. We often take pride in writing, characters carved into stone, manuscripts inked onto paper, data stored on servers. But think about this. Paper burns in an instant. Ink fades within centuries. Servers, no matter how advanced, last only decades without maintenance. Even stone inscriptions, given enough rain and time, erode into blank surfaces. After tens of thousands of years, nearly all texts, all works, all libraries would be gone. If an industrial civilization once existed before us, then their language, no matter how rich, has dissolved completely. No writing, no archives, no libraries remain. Perhaps only fragments survived in oral memory, drifting into myth, stories of lost ages, great floods, or gods who brought knowledge from afar. And the same holds true for us. If our civilization collapsed, our poems, philosophies, novels, even our scientific treatises, all would scatter into dust. After thousands of years, a few stone carvings might survive, but their words would be meaningless to those who followed. After millions of years, even those stones would be crushed back into the earth. The haunting question then is this: when language disappears, what is left to tell our story? The answer is brutally cold, nothing but lifeless traces, a layer of carbon, a radioactive anomaly, a fragment of fossilized plastic. Everything we call civilization, knowledge, culture, spirit, rests upon language. And when language is gone, that civilization is truly dead, even if a few scattered artifacts remain. This is the deepest tragedy. What is most fragile is also most precious. Language is the breath of intelligence, but breath disappears into air. No machine of geology can preserve a voice, a melody, the meaning of a sentence. Perhaps the only thing that survives is the question itself, because each time we retell myths, each time we notice strange anomalies in stone, it is doubt, was there someone before us, that keeps memory alive. In searching for them, we unknowingly maintain a collective memory, uncertain, but enough to awaken humility. If a civilization before us did vanish, then their language has fallen silent forever. But maybe that silence is the message that no story, no song, no empire is guaranteed to endure. Before we even imagine civilizations that might have existed before humanity, we can look at the record of our own history. There we see brilliant, creative and powerful societies that rose high only to collapse, leaving behind ruined temples, faded inscriptions, and questions that will never be fully answered. Human history is not a straight line. It is a spiral of ascent, peak, and decline. And that spiral is a warning. No matter how dazzling, civilization has never been eternal. Sumer, often called the cradle of civilization, once filled Mesopotamia with the first writing system, the bustling cities of Uruk and Ur, and clay tablets recording trade, laws, and poetry. They invented the wheel, irrigation, and some of the earliest forms of governance. Yet after just a few millennia, Sumer collapsed. Floods, soil salinization from over-irrigation, endless wars, all converged to erase a society that had given humanity some of its most enduring pillars. The Maya in Central America tell a similar story. They built majestic cities like Tikal, Palenque, and Chichen Itza, stone pyramids rising above the jungle canopy. Their calendar was precise, their astronomy sophisticated, their rituals and art profound. But within a few centuries, between 800 and 1000 CE, most of their cities were abandoned. The likely culprits? Prolonged droughts, internal wars, and exhausted resources. By the time the Spanish arrived, the Maya civilization was only a shadow of itself, its temples swallowed by the forest. The Khmer Empire in Southeast Asia, centered at Angkor, was one of the great societies of the medieval world. Angkor Wat, the vast temple complex, still stands as a monument to their technical mastery and spiritual devotion. Yet by the 15th century, Angkor was abandoned. Climate shifts, the breakdown of its massive hydraulic system, and external conflicts brought it down. For centuries, its great cities lay hidden in the jungle until rediscovered by the modern world. These examples, though only thousands of years old, reveal the fragility of civilization. If empires that once ruled millions, commanded advanced techniques, and raised monumental works could collapse and nearly vanish from memory, then imagine what forgetting looks like after millions of years. The truth is stark. Civilization is not linear, it is cyclical. It blooms, peaks, and withers. With each collapse, much of its knowledge and memory are lost. We today build on scattered fragments left by earlier cycles, and sometimes we deceive ourselves into thinking we are the first. If even civilizations within our grasp of history have been largely forgotten, then the idea of a pre-human civilization is not as far-fetched as it seems. The distance between we know they existed and we no longer remember anything is razor-thin, and time always erases that line. Perhaps history has already written the warning for us. Every light, no matter how radiant, will eventually fade. And unless we learn humility, we may follow the same path as Sumer, as Maya, as Khmer, with one difference. When we vanish, there may be no one left to remember at all. One of the strangest features of humanity is this: communities separated by thousands of miles with no direct contact tell stories that sound almost identical. From Greece to India, from the Hopi of North America to the Polynesians scattered across the Pacific, we find repeating motifs: a lost golden age, a world-destroying flood, gods or ancient teachers who once bestowed knowledge upon humanity and then vanished. What explains these parallels? The simplest answer is that they spring from the shared structure of human imagination. Every society knows disaster. Every culture fears water, fire, and darkness. Every community feels the need to explain the origins of its knowledge and its existence. By this reasoning, similar stories could easily arise independently in many different places. This is the view most often offered by mainstream scholarship. But there is another possibility, more compelling, more haunting, that these stories come from some ancient collective memory, carried across generations, translated into new languages, reshaped into local forms, but always preserving a common core. Perhaps they recall a real catastrophe or even a civilization that has long since disappeared. Take the flood myth. It isn't just in the Bible or the Epic of Gilgamesh. It appears among the Maya and the Inca in China, in the Yoruba traditions of Africa, and among far-off island peoples. Could it all be coincidence? Or are these the scattered fragments of memory from a global event, like the sudden flooding at the end of the Ice Age, when melting glaciers raised sea levels by dozens of meters, drowning vast tracts of land? The same pattern appears with the stories of gods who taught humanity. In Egypt, Thoth gave writing. In Mesopotamia, Enki brought wisdom. In Greece, Prometheus stole fire from the heavens. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl gifted agriculture and astronomy. The motif is too widespread to be dismissed as chance. It suggests that humans everywhere carry a vague sense that knowledge did not simply emerge, it was given, passed down, from a source now lost. These tales may not prove the existence of an ancient civilization, but they still hold a particular power. They reveal that humanity has always sensed it arrived late, that something happened before the official dawn of history. That memory, too large to vanish, transformed into myth, and so continues to live on in the imagination. Seen with humility, myth becomes a kind of compressed data, a way for collective memory to preserve information across millennia. We may never decode it completely, but it still whispers a question. Are we listening to echoes of a forgotten chapter of history? And even if the answer is no, the parallels themselves still teach us something. Humanity has always feared its own fragility. We know the world can collapse. We know knowledge can be lost. We know civilization can vanish. That is why the same stories are told again and again to remind us of a truth we would rather ignore. Nothing guarantees that tomorrow will look anything like today. If we see Earth not as a static home but as a vast laboratory, a pattern emerges. Every era is an experiment, each testing a different model of life. In those experiments, some succeed, some fail. Some run for hundreds of millions of years. Others flare briefly and vanish forever. During the Devonian period, 400 million years ago, the oceans were the laboratory. Life exploded with ancient fish, bones and jaws appeared, opening the way for creatures the world had never seen before. But then a mass extinction swept most of them away, clearing space for the better adapted. In the Jurassic and Cretaceous, dinosaurs reigned, Earth's grand model of life for more than 150 million years. They became the planet's masters, reaching colossal sizes, diversifying into countless forms, seemingly unshakable. And then, in a single fateful moment, the Chicxulub asteroid strike, the entire model collapsed. Out of the ashes, a new experiment began. The small mammals that once lived in the dinosaurs' shadow rose to prominence. By that logic, humanity itself is only another experiment, one of nature's more recent trials. A primate suddenly armed with extraordinary intelligence, mastering fire, shaping tools, and creating culture and technology. In less than 300,000 years, we've reshaped the entire biosphere. Yet in the canvas of billions of years, our appearance is just one small test run inside the vast laboratory that Earth continues to run. And in that lab, failure is the rule. Only about 1% of all species that have ever lived still exist today. 99% are gone, models discarded, experiments that ended. No one can say with certainty whether humans belong to the rare 1% destined to endure, or if we will join the 99% erased. If there was ever an industrial civilization before us, they too were only experiments. Perhaps nature has tested intelligence many times, across ages we can no longer see. Each time it may have flared, risen into some form of civilization, and then collapsed. whether through extinction, climate upheaval, or its own self-destruction. And Earth, indifferent as a scientist without pity, simply began another trial. Thinking this way humbles us. We are not the final result, only a prototype. And like every prototype, there is no guarantee of success. We might prevail, we might fail, or we might serve only as a stepping stone for something more resilient, more enduring, more intelligent. The great question then is not, are we unique, but what will we do with this brief experiment? Deep time cares nothing for our triumphs or tragedies. It only cares how this experiment ends and whether it leaves behind anything at all for the next chapter. From the moment we learned to think, humans have placed ourselves at the center of the universe. We once believed the sun revolved around the earth, that heaven lay just above our heads, that humanity was the ultimate purpose of creation. And though science has dismantled those illusions again and again, one deep remnant remains. We believe our civilization is unique, unprecedented, and unrepeatable. That belief is born from a kind of instinctive arrogance. We look at our colossal achievements, skyscrapers, spacecraft, particle accelerators, and assume nothing like them ever existed before. We see the gaps in the geological record and declare, no traces exist, therefore no one came before us. But that claim rests more on collective ego than on objective truth. In the vastness of the cosmos, we are a speck of dust. In Earth's 4.5 billion years, we've existed only a few 100,000. If intelligence is rare but not singular, then its appearance more than once on the same planet is hardly impossible. So why are we so quick to assume we were the first? Our arrogance also colors how we see the future. Many believe modern civilization is unassailable, that science and technology will shield us from every disaster, yet history has proven the opposite. Every civilization thought itself eternal until the moment it fell. Sumer, Rome, the Maya, each believed its light would never fade. Time and nature proved otherwise. The more troubling truth is that arrogance does not just blind us, it deafens us to warnings. As climate shifts, forests fall, wars escalate, and destructive technologies spread, we still cling to the belief that our intellect will solve everything. But perhaps it is that very belief, the refusal to acknowledge limits, that sows the seeds of collapse. Civilizations don't crumble for lack of power. They collapse because they trusted their power too much. If there was once an industrial civilization before us, perhaps they too fell into this trap, convinced they were special, the pinnacle, destined to endure forever. And perhaps it was in that moment that nature, through catastrophe or cycle, delivered the lesson they failed to learn. That humility is the first requirement for survival. Our arrogance, in this sense, is the most fragile mirror of all. It reflects that we are threatened not only by asteroids, volcanoes, or ice ages, but by ourselves. If we cannot learn humility from the fires already extinguished before us, then we may become just another of them, one more flame that flared and died, leaving Earth to turn the page to a new chapter without the name human. History is not just memory, it is a mirror. And when we look into that mirror, what stares back at us is not always a flattering reflection, but a warning. Every civilization that came before us, from Sumer to the Maya, from the Khmer to Rome, left behind the same message. Nothing lasts forever. These societies once believed their light would never fade. The Romans built roads across Europe, confident in Roma Eterna, eternal Rome. Yet within a few centuries, the empire collapsed, its cities were plundered, its mighty monuments reduced to ruins. The Maya, with their sophisticated astronomy and towering pyramids, must have imagined their cities would stand for millennia. Instead, the jungle reclaimed them, leaving behind only silent stone. The Khmer built Angkor as the heart of a vast empire, only to abandon it, surrendering their temples to the creeping vines of time. What's striking is that collapse rarely comes from a single blow. More often, it is the slow accumulation of cracks, resources running dry, climates shifting, wars breaking out, plagues spreading, ambitions outpacing the means to sustain them, and then suddenly the whole system gives way so quickly that those living through it may not even realize they are witnessing the end. That is the lesson history offers. Civilizations don't usually die in storms, they die of erosion, worn down from within. No empire ever believed it would fall until it already had. Arrogance, the belief in uniqueness, is often the very blindness that keeps people from seeing the warnings gathering all around them. If there was once an industrial civilization before us, perhaps they too walked this path. Perhaps they overexploited, pushed their ecosystems past the breaking point, trusted too much in their technology to solve the crises they had unleashed. And then, in a geological instant, their flame went out. Looking at the past, it's impossible not to see ourselves in its reflection. We too live in a globalized system, fragile in its interconnections, straining the earth for every resource, heating the climate, threatening the environment that sustains us. The difference now is scale. Our civilization is larger, its impact global, which means if collapse comes, it will not be local, but planetary. History whispers a simple truth. Every civilization believed it was special, and everyone was wrong. If we are wise enough to listen, we may find in the past not just the stories of fallen empires, but the reminder of where our own road may lead. The question then is not, will our civilization collapse? The real question is, will we be humble enough to change before it is too late? Or will we become just another forgotten chapter in Earth's book? If one day humanity disappears, the question is, what will we leave behind in Earth's geological record? Not libraries, not museums, not songs or memories. Those will vanish quickly. What endures will be cold imprints, the fossilized scars of industrialization, etched not in poetry, but in chemistry and stone. First, there is plastic. Since the mid-20th century, humanity has produced billions of tons of it, scattered across oceans, deserts, ice sheets, and even inside living creatures. While much of it will decay, some will be buried, compacted, and transformed into a new kind of rock, plastiglomerate, a fusion of plastic, sand, coral, and shells. For millions of years to come, these strange formations may stand as unmistakable markers of the age of humans, artificial fossils embedded in the crust. Then comes radiation. Nuclear weapons tests of the 20th century spread across the planet isotopes that nature rarely produces: plutonium-244, americium-241, cesium-137. Some of these have half-lives stretching tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years, which means that millions of years from now, long after most of our legacy has crumbled, these nuclear anomalies will remain in the strata, a silent message that once there was a species who learned how to split the atom. And then there are greenhouse gases. In less than 2 centuries, we have pumped an immense volume of CO2 into the atmosphere, disrupting the global carbon cycle. Much of it is being absorbed into the oceans and will, over time, settle into limestone, seashells, and marine sediment. Millions of years from now, geologists could drill into rock and find a sharp, abnormal spike in carbon, a geological fingerprint of our presence, a sudden Anthropocene anomaly. Other traces will endure as well. We are dispersing rare elements like lithium, neodymium, and cobalt, once locked in ore bodies, now scattered worldwide. Synthetic compounds, pesticides, dioxins, PFAS, the so-called forever chemicals, will persist in soils and groundwater, fossilized as chemical scars of the industrial age. All of this paints a bitter paradox. What lasts longest of humanity may not be our greatest achievements, but our most toxic leftovers. If another civilization arises tens of millions of years from now and drills into these layers, they won't uncover Beethoven's music or Shakespeare's words. They will find plastic, radiation, carbon spikes, and industrial poisons. That will be our fossil will and testament. And when we turn this perspective back toward the past, we must ask, if a civilization existed before us, could the strange anomalies we see in today's geology, unusual metal concentrations, mysterious chemical shifts, be the faint remnants of theirs? Perhaps the way we examine our own geological footprint is also the way to understand what came before. Evidence does not survive in monuments, but in scars. And when seen this way, one truth emerges: Earth will remember us, but its memory will not be gentle. It will remember us by our wounds. We like to think modern civilization is stronger than ever. Globalization has bound every continent together. The internet transmits knowledge instantly. Supply chains span nations, delivering everything from food to microchips. Yet it is this very interconnectedness that makes our society fragile. Today, one well-placed shock could shake the structure and bring it crashing down. Remember the COVID-19 pandemic. A microscopic virus was enough to paralyze global supply chains, shut borders, and stagger the world economy. That was only a small test, a glimpse of just how dependent globalization is on fragile stability. Imagine something greater, a deadlier pandemic, a regional nuclear conflict, a collapse of the global power grid. The cascading effects could set civilization back centuries in only a few years. What makes it worse is centralization. We depend on a handful of core technologies, a few production centers, a few transport arteries. Semiconductors, the brains of modern infrastructure, are produced in only a few factories. If those facilities were destroyed, global industry could freeze overnight. The same is true for grain, for oil and gas. A natural disaster or conflict in those regions would not remain local. It would ripple across the entire planet. In this light, we are not so different from past empires. The Maya depended on intricate irrigation systems. When drought struck, their cities fell. The Khmer built Angkor on vast canals. When climate shifted, they could not maintain them. And us? We have placed everything on the bet of globalization. The only difference is scale, larger, faster, and with consequences far more devastating. If a strong enough shock comes, modern cities could face prolonged blackouts. Supermarkets would empty within days, transport would halt, healthcare would collapse. Within months, nations could descend into chaos and high-tech civilization would crumble into primitive survival systems. A global civilization could disappear not in centuries, but in 1 or 2 generations. And then our history would be buried, no different from the lost empires before us. After a few thousand years, if descendants remained, they might tell legends of a golden age, when humans could fly, speak across vast distances and harness energy from the atom. But those would be only stories with no proof left behind. This reveals a bitter truth. Our greatest strength is also our greatest weakness. We have built a world of unprecedented interdependence, and that makes our civilization a castle of sand. One great wave, and all of it could collapse. If there was once a civilization before humanity, perhaps they too reached their own version of globalization, a level of connection they thought unbreakable. And when the shock came, they vanished, leaving the planet empty, waiting for another species to rise. When we thread together all the fragments, the short lifespan of cities, the mercilessness of geology, the recurring myths, the rise and fall of civilizations we already know, a picture begins to emerge. Perhaps civilization is not a straight march upward, but a wheel turning in cycles. Imagine this. Nature has tested intelligence many times. A species rises to greatness, builds tools, harnesses energy, organizes society. and then in some way, through war, natural disaster, climate upheaval, or self-destruction, it disappears. Earth wipes the slate clean. Then, millions of years later, another species emerges, starting again. Each turn leaves behind faint traces, myths, geological anomalies, but never enough to become undeniable proof. And so every new age believes it is the first. It sounds like a tragic loop. Yet in the scale of deep time, it is entirely plausible. If a civilization like ours could rise in just 300,000 years, a geological blink, then why wouldn't Earth, in its 4.5 billion years, have had many chances to repeat the experiment? Life itself has died out and returned again and again. Why should intelligence as a product of life appear only once? Ancient myths often spoke of repeating ages. The Greeks told of the ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron, each decaying into the next until the cycle began anew. In India, the yugas span thousands of years, moving from purity to decline before rebirth. The Maya believed multiple worlds had existed before ours, each destroyed by catastrophe, only for a new one to rise. Are these moral allegories, or are they echoes of real cycles of civilization, memories of wheels that turned before us? If so, then we today are simply living through another turn of that wheel. And the real question is not, are we the first civilization, but can we break the cycle? We might learn from the failures that repeat endlessly: arrogance, the illusion of immortality, the overuse of resources, the blindness to warnings. But is our intelligence enough to step off the wheel, or will we spin it once more only to vanish and leave nature to try again? In this light, humanity's place becomes both humbling and chilling. We are neither the beginning nor the end. We are only a single turn of the wheel of time, a turn that might repeat or end forever if we collapse. The wheel keeps spinning, with or without us. And if we are not careful, the name Homo sapiens will fade into nothing more than a faint echo in the endless cycle that Earth has always, and will always, keep testing. When we lift our eyes to the night sky, we are overwhelmed by the vastness of the cosmos. Stars lie thousands, even millions of light years away. Galaxies stretch endlessly, each one holding hundreds of billions of suns. Against this backdrop, humanity is nothing more than a speck of dust drifting in infinite darkness. On the scale of the universe, we are so small that we verge on meaninglessness, and yet within that smallness hides a terrifying power. For though our species has existed for less than 300,000 years, we have already altered the entire face of the planet. In just 2 short centuries, we have burned through fossil fuels that took hundreds of millions of years to form, disrupted the global climate, driven thousands of species into extinction, and forged weapons capable of erasing nearly all life in a single day. In the universe, humanity is not the center, but on Earth, no species has ever been so dangerous. Dinosaurs ruled for over 150 million years, yet they never changed the atmosphere or the oceans as we have. Even the Chicxulub asteroid, which ended their reign, was a rare event. We, on the other hand, drop human-made asteroids on our planet every day, through our industries, technologies, and consumption. What makes us dangerous is not just our power, but our lack of humility in wielding it. We believe we control nature, when in truth we are destabilizing the delicate balance that sustains life. And if that balance breaks, we will be the first to fall. In the universe, there may be countless planets with life. Perhaps somewhere out there, other civilizations once reached this same dangerous threshold, intelligent enough to build technology but not wise enough to survive it. Maybe that is why the night sky is silent, the Fermi paradox. If intelligence is common, why do we see no one else? The answer may be that most civilizations destroy themselves before they can leave lasting signals. If that is true, then our place in the cosmos becomes clear. We are small, we are dangerous, we are fragile. We are small compared to the infinite, but dangerous to the very world that sustains us. We are fragile before the immensity of deep time, yet we act as though immortal. Caught between these two extremes, the insignificance of the universe and the destructive potential of our own hands, we must confront a single great question. What will we choose to do with this fleeting moment? Will we remain arrogant and drive ourselves into extinction, or will we learn humility and endure long enough to become the rare exception in nature's cycle? The universe does not need us, and it is precisely that fact that makes our choice more important than ever. Modern science, with all its great discoveries, has taught us a profound lesson. We are not the center of anything, not the center of the earth, as the Middle Ages once believed, not the center of the solar system, as Copernicus proved, not the center of the galaxy, and certainly not the center of the universe, and perhaps not even the center of life's story on this planet. This is the lesson of cosmological humility, a posture not only of science but of spirit. It forces us to see ourselves as a fragile sliver within the vast wheel of deep time. Before us there may have been other flames. After us there will surely be life again, in one form or another. We are not the beginning, and we are unlikely to be the end, but humility does not exist to make us smaller in despair. On the contrary, it is an invitation to awaken. For once we see that we are not special, we begin to understand the value of the moment we do have. If civilization is only a flame in the wind, then its brief burning is the most precious thing of all. And we have a choice to let it fade into meaninglessness or to let it shine brightly enough to send a message into the future. Carl Sagan once said that Earth is nothing more than a pale blue dot drifting in the cosmos. Yet it is that very smallness that makes it sacred. Every life, every civilization, every dream has unfolded on that dot. There is no other stage for us if we do not cherish it, protect it, and live humbly within it. No one else will. Placed against the backdrop of the hypothesis of pre-human civilizations, this humility becomes even more urgent. If others came before us, they are gone. No one remembers them. If their flames once burned, they are extinguished, and only darkness remains. Faced with that possibility, we must ask, will we follow them into oblivion, or will we dare to break the cycle, this time to do it differently? Cosmological humility does not weaken us. It makes us stronger because it frees us from the illusion of supremacy and allows us to see that every action matters. We may be small, but in that very smallness, each decision echoes across time, not just for ourselves, but for the entire flow of life on this planet. And so instead of arrogantly believing we are the only ones, we should bow our heads and listen to the whispers of the strata, the myths, the cycles that have already turned. They are telling us, awaken, or you too will become nothing more than another shadow in the endless book of the universe. As this journey comes to an end, we return to the first question. Are we truly the first civilization on Earth? The answer, as we have seen, cannot be certain. Geology is a machine that grinds evidence away. Time is a thief that erases memory. Humanity's collective remembrance is too fragile to preserve anything beyond a few thousand years. If there was an industrial civilization before us, it has vanished so completely that only shadows remain. In myths and in faint chemical traces we may not yet recognize. But perhaps more important than the answer is the question itself. For it forces us to confront our own reflection and the fragility of what we are building. If cities can vanish in mere millennia, if knowledge can crumble within a few generations, if entire civilizations can be swallowed by climate shocks or natural disasters, then we are no different from the flames that once burned before us, brilliant but fleeting. And so the second question rises, more urgent than the first. Will we be wise enough not to become a myth ourselves if we continue with arrogance, believing ourselves immortal, trusting technology alone to save us from the wounds we inflict? Then we may follow the same path as civilizations before. Earth will once again wipe the slate clean, and millions of years from now, another species may stand, gaze into the silence of the strata, and ask the same question we are asking tonight. But if we learn humility, if we understand that we are not the center, that life is precious but fragile, that intelligence must be paired with responsibility, then perhaps this time will be different. Perhaps we will not be just another turn of the wheel, but the beginning of a chapter that lasts longer, that endures. Darkness and light have always walked together. Darkness reminds us of forgetting, of extinction. Light reminds us of resilience, of meaning in the moment we hold. And humanity's civilization, in all its smallness and danger, now stands at the threshold between the two. The real question is not, were there others before us? The real question is, what will we leave behind for the future to inherit? A wound, a legend, or proof that intelligence can learn humility and endure? In the silence of the universe, no one will answer for us. It is our choice, here, now, that will decide whether we become light or only another shadow in the deep memory of the earth.